this show is about books and reading recommendations. And yeah, that's about the amount of enthusiasm it deserves. Thank you very much. That is the enthusiasm right there. It's not a great idea, and I know that because my Irish friends are very good at saying it to me face when I have bad ideas. And they're like, that's a terrible idea. Why would you do such a thing? And I was like, well, I've travelled extensively around America doing comedy. I've been to a lot of your smaller towns, and I just thought, you needed it. I know, it sounds a bit stabby, but that's it, really. That was the motivation. A little bit of advertising and marketing, of course, because it always is a bit in America, isn't it? And I said something a few years ago I don't believe to be controversial at all. I said, Irish people have no white guilt. And we don't. Totally true. Due to a revolutionary strategy we had where we had potatoes in the ground and we just picked them ourselves. And, well... Now, black people get that joke 100% of the time. And over time and testing it, I've realised that white Americans can take a minute and go their own way on the interpretation of what I'm trying to say there. And I learned that in your intellectual heartland, Alabama. I know, I was doing a show there and this guy came up to me and the stuff he was saying was totally bonkers. And then he went down really racial avenue. And then at the end of it, he went, I'm Irish myself. I said, you're not. You're not. I was so alarmed by what he was saying. I was like, how did you get catfished into coming to this comedy show? If you don't mind me asking. And he said, I saw your videos online where you said you ain't got no white guilt. Well, I came because I ain't got none neither. I was like, oh, bollocks. No, I am not ready to be the leader of this new movement. It led to a real moment of reflection. I had to go, well, Jesus, how do I stop lunatics like this coming to shows? And it turns out you just put the word reading in the title. This is what we're left with, so thank you. It's a good process of natural selection, really. And I haven't taken any chances. Like, for this whole show, everywhere I've been doing it in America, if you tuned into this in any way, shape, or form, you would have seen me, pictures of just me in unnecessary piles of books. And every image, it was just me with a load of books. And that book has become my crucifix for hillbillies. I just thought I'd like, get back, I got information. And they don't like information at all, so it's been working pretty well. And it was gas because, the whole idea of books is just get informed on topics and then we can make fun of them or debate them in any way we want, but we start from a place of information. So I was making fun of me mate in Alabama, just a smidgen, because he was telling me he was Irish and I was like, no, I don't know about that. But I was like, well, seeing you're Irish, you must know Imelda May, great singer, songwriter we have from Ireland, and she has a wonderful line and it says, you don't get to be racist and Irish. Irish people would never hate anyone based on the colour of their skin because we're busy hating people who look just like us. We have 800 years of experience with that one. And it runs pretty deep, I tell you. You think it's gone, it can just resurface at any moment. And I have an American friend and he loves icebreaker questions because you Americans, you love making a socially awkward situation even more socially awkward. And he says to people, what dog do you envisage as a murderer? I know. Every time I say corgi. And I know, thank you. Some of you, if you don't get that, just ask an Irish person. We will happily explain it to you. I see a few of you doing it there. Thank you. Thank you very much. You had to be like, that joke's about the Queen. She's dead. Not sure if it's okay to laugh. You're like, oh, it's fine. Corgi's not dead, still alive, so feck him. That's it. That one's definitely at the Corgi's expense. But this guy, he was hilarious. I know I was genuinely explaining stuff to him that is kind of historically accurate. I was like, Irish people think we're black, right? And he's like, what? I said, oh, yeah, we've been saying it behind closed doors for years. We are the blacks of Europe. And he's like, you might not want to say that anymore. And I was like, no, we're already really committed to that strategy. I mean, we've made a movie and called it The Commitments. And some of you will have seen it. Fantastic movie about 11 white Irish people in a jazz band, and their slogan is, say it once, say it loud, we're black and we're proud. And I know you don't have diversity training in this country anymore. But if you did, that would be a bit of a red flag, wouldn't it? You're like, listen, Irish people, you can't just be saying you're black. That's not how it works. But we never saw anything wrong with doing that. We always looked at black culture and we saw shared oppression, segregation, and of course, love of hip hop. And I know you think we love traditional music, diddly eye and the fiddle and all that stuff, and we do, but primarily we export it to you. We're at home rapping our faces off, to be honest. Love it. We grew up hugely under the influence of all things black culture, like biggest watched TV shows by a mile, all black. Different Strokes, The Fresh Prince, and The Cosbys, which worked out well for nobody, really. But that's on your country. We were just watching. And the biggest selling bands by a mile when I was growing up were NWA and Public Enemy. And yeah, I know. I don't know if you've listened to their lyrics. They're a little bit feisty. We were just out there repeating them verbatim. Yeah, you'll be like, were you saying that word? And we're like, oh yeah, we were saying all the words because we had no Americans around to tell us to stop doing it. We had no black people either, so we were just out there like a bunch of futuristic M&Ms. You know, we never thought twice about any division. We just looked at it and saw that shared experience. You know, we don't even have the expression in Ireland, black Irish. I first heard that when I moved to America. They're like, are you one of those black Irish guys? And I'm like, what? What is that? We don't have that expression in Ireland because if you're black and you're born in Ireland, we don't need the first word. Yeah. Really, it's obvious, really. We can tell that you're black. Just by looking at you, we know. You know, I think it's one of our superpowers, observation. Like, has anyone told Paddy he's black? And you're like, no, he knows. He's fully aware. It's just superfluous, isn't it, really? But I guess we always thought about it. If you're born in Ireland, you're Irish. I don't really need any other qualifying words. You know, it's funny, when I always meet Americans, I have a good laugh because they're like, oh, you're Irish? I actually grew up Irish Catholic. And I'm like, well, what were the other options? We never saw the divide at all. Like, you know, we literally looked at black culture and we're like, yeah, we relate to it. There's a great book about it called Say Nothing. And I'll mention loads of books tonight because if I didn't, it'd be false advertising. And I know as Americans, you're perfectly comfortable with that as a society. But for the immigrants, it takes us a while to figure out that you can just say any concoction of complete waffle for financial gain. And you're like, well, that's capitalism. And we're like, oh, fair enough. Thank you. Takes a while to figure it out, but I'll mention loads of books because I did promise that. And one, Say Nothing, is great, and it really describes how Irish people looked at the black movement in America, specifically Martin Luther King and Malcolm X, and we said, look what they're doing for civil rights. We need to start doing the same thing in Ireland. And we did. We got inspired, started our own peaceful protest that over time, to be honest, became a bit more explosive. I know, you'll be like, why? And again, corgis. It's always corgis. And I should have warned you, for those of you who aren't used to Irish culture, but, you know, we're not really like Americans, I suppose, in a storytelling format. Americans, you're very planned, very structured, very linear. You're like, this is the hero's journey. We're all just going down this path here, and we're building tension. We're going to release the tension here at the top, and we're just going to resolve that conflict, okay? And the Irish person's more like, I'm going for a walk. I don't know if I'm coming back. Could be going anywhere, to be honest. And so this show might be a bit like that, to be honest, but hopefully we'll end up at some logical conclusion that makes no form of sense. Otherwise, I'll be posting negative comments myself on this video. I'll be the first one to downvote. I'll be like, this dude sucks. And they're like, ooh, very overly negative on your own stuff there. You never know. So I will mention loads of books. And I think we should do a better job as immigrants to America. When we're around Americans, we should let you know that sometimes behind your back, we do be making fun of you. Now, nothing too bad, you know, but it is normally linked to portion control. Oh yeah, we look at you and you're like, they're not going to eat all that, are they? And oh, you are, absolutely, yeah. And then we see Costco and we're like, it's real. I can't believe it. That's a place. Like that's what. And the reason to put it into perspective, of course, I don't know if you noticed, Irish people, we invented potato chips. Yeah, you're welcome. Fundamentally changed America with that one. And well, we also invented flavoring potato chips, and I don't think we ever flavored food again, to be honest. Just salt and vinegar and ketchup for everything else from that day forward. And do you know the beauty of when you invent something, you get to name it? So we call them crisps. So if you could stop feckin' changing the name of our stuff. Because it's very confusing for me to call them potato chips. I just want to eat crisps when I get here. And when you go to Ireland, you eat your crisps out of a bag about the size of my hand. And then we come to America and we find you eating them out of sleeping bags. I don't know about the other immigrants in the room, but I've never seen another human disappear into a bag of chips until I moved to America. I was like, where's Carl gone? He said he was getting laid. It turns out he's just in Lays. Very, very, very different. And again, the concept of poking fun at stuff is doing it in an informed manner, right? And if I'm going to do it, I'll always try and at least read something around it. There's a book I love specifically for all this. It's called Factfulness by Hans Rosling. And the book is so good that when Hans Rosling passed away, Bill Gates made 4 million copies available for free 1 year to every single graduating student in the whole of America because he believed the book's message was so important. And the book basically says, get to know the statistics behind things. Know the numbers, they will tell you the true picture. So if you're one of these people that's like, listen, the world has never been so bad right now. Actually, on nearly every available measurable metric, it's never been so good. So shut up, get out there and be happy. At least that's what I took away from it. You go your own way on the interpretation, but I love the message, but it also inspired me to use statistics to figure out, are Americans the chunkiest monkeys in the whole world? Like, are you guys out eating everybody per capita, per day, caloric intake? And it turns out you're not. You're number 2. Yeah, number 1, back in Ireland. I did not see that coming. That is ruining our reputation. We are famous for starvation. That's our thing. I know, you'll be like, why? Corgis. That's why. Again, they're at the root of everything. But the portion control becomes a bit relevant because I suppose I should have been used to dealing with interesting characters like me mate in Alabama. Because when I first tried to move to America, I tried to move to Boston and they told me it was full, which I wasn't expecting. There was a group of us, they said, we have a housing shortage. You shouldn't really try and live in Boston this summer. Go to our neighbouring state. You're going to love our neighbouring state, New Hampshire. Most American state motto ever, live free or die. We were like, oh yeah, I think we do like the sound of that. And then by the end of the first day, 6 out of 7 of us had been arrested. Yeah, we hadn't even started trying to live free or die yet. We were just easing in. We got arrested for a thing called an open container violation. A crime that you cannot commit in Ireland because if you have a container, you're going to open it. I mean, that is the fundamental function of a container. To be open. That's the completion of its life journey, more or less. Like, what kind of fucking evil marshmallow psychological experiment would it be to sell Irish people cans of alcohol and just force us to stare at them and not open it and just time us to see how that goes? Like that is the real violation in that one. And it was funny, everyone got arrested except me. I was never so disappointed. They all got participation certificates. I didn't get one. I know, I missed out because everyone told me Coors Light is basically water. Drink as much as you like. And turns out not true at all. Especially if you drink 15 cans of it. Yeah. My whole lower body just stopped working. My legs were gone. I was stuck to the sofa, taken down by the silver bullet. It was pretty embarrassing, to be honest. And I was drinking inside. Everyone else was drinking outside the door, literally 2 meters away. That's why they got arrested. And I was like, freedom doesn't extend very far at all. I just thought it was wild. So I spent the whole summer trying to make up for this. And eventually the moment came, and it was funny. I got lucky. A very friendly American guy just turned up at the door one night, totally random. And that's the beauty of being Irish in America. You guys really do welcome us with open arms, and we appreciate it. And you've done things with our culture that we never saw coming, to be honest. Like when you made St. Patrick's Day a month, we were like, whew. That is a lot of St. Patrick. You know, you are not going to feel good at the end of that month at all. And then you started celebrating St. Patrick's Day on such a grand Americanized scale that we've had to start traveling here from Ireland to celebrate our own feckin' holiday. In your country, madness. And then you're pretty liberal about when you decide it should be, because we come over, we're like, well, you know, we heard about it, we read the reviews online, biggest St. Patrick's Days, so you're getting going wild, there's a big party, I'm here, I'm ready, and you guys are like, I can't believe you missed it. You're like, huh, I didn't miss it, today's the day, March 17th, they're like, no, we actually celebrated last weekend, yeah. Sometimes we move it for convenience. I don't know if you know how, the old patron saints work, but you can't just be moving them around like you're homeless people. Oh, I know, yeah, a bit stabby, that one. But you said, if you see something, say something. So, just trying to follow the rules. What? Because you don't move our other holidays. Like, you've borrowed two and really made them part of your own culture. Of course, St. Patrick's Day, and of course, our other one, our Celtic pagan festival that celebrates the passing of the dead souls and the coming of the winter solstice. Halloween, that you've turned into dragging little chunky children door to door and feeding them Costco quantities of sugar and alarming amounts of peanut butter that we do not believe to be a protein whatsoever. And then we find you carving feckin' pumpkins. We're like, what are you doing here? The tradition is a turnip. If you're going to borrow it, a turnip. If you can make a face out of a turnip, there's a sense of achievement in that. Any moron can make a face out of a pumpkin. But that's the beauty of America. You guys are like, you know what? We can do more with more. Makes sense when you think about it, I suppose. And you guys are, as a nation, you're wonderfully practical. You know, you're like, use a pumpkin, we can also turn it into a spice-flavored laxative beverage, and people will pay $11 to poop themselves in the name of Ireland. Like, we did not see that coming. Like, that's up there with the time you guys made a movie, called it The Irishman, and didn't put any feckin' Irish people in the movie. It's not like it wasn't long enough. You could have just squeezed in some lad called Seamus in the background, just walking around snorting Lucky Charms or washing himself with Irish Spring soap or whatever you think we'd be doing as a culture. Nothing, just a whole cast of Italians. And you went, yeah, that seems okay, I think. Just another white guy. We're like, we are black. And you're like, shut up about that over there. We've had to take affirmative action. You know, you pressured us into it, so now we've had to send over our best actors to America to become your Oppenheimers, your Gladiators, and even your Penguins. We're taking all your Academy Awards. We're buggering off back to Ireland, and we're making a movie called The American, and you're not in it. You're not. No, just a whole cast of Venezuelans, and let's see. That would be a bit cheeky, but I'd watch it. It depends how long it is, I suppose, you know. But yeah, this guy, he was so friendly anyway at the door. I guess I knew there was a point to this. If I just kept talking, it normally works out okay, but don't be panicking. Keep us on track, will you? You're fairly close. Just give us a little wave if you're like, what the hell is he doing now? What's your name? Chris, yeah, just keep us on track there. You look like a sensible individual. If you're like, he's forgotten something, I have. So just give us a shout. But, this fella, he was so friendly, and he's like, hey, Irish guys, want to play a drinking game? And we were like, well, we have news for you. We're actually playing it right now. This is it. We sit here in sadness, and we keep drinking until we get a little bit happier. That's the game. Yeah, we've never seen the need to introduce a sporting competitive element. There's no halftime show, no Beyonce, no McDonald's sponsorship. We don't even keep score because we all lose in the end. So, we pretty much invented this. If you want to sit down, you're more than welcome. And that's when the portion control came in, Chris, because, he just whipped out a funnel. Like, yeah, for changing the oil in a car. To drink out of. Not enough of you are alarmed by that sentence. How are we meant to know as immigrants that drinking out of a funnel for changing the oil in a car is a central component of your $100,000 a year university education system? To make it worse, it was an O'Reilly's Auto Parts funnel. Why are you trusting Irish people with your automotive spare parts industry? We don't even trust ourselves with automotive spare parts. Irish people have no history of success in the automotive industry. Nothing. We invented and manufactured the DeLorean, the car in Back to the Future. It had no future. Don't be trusting us. And we're already making, because we only moved over to America, we're kind of still in shock with the portion control. And there's this fellow with this bright red funnel going, come on, let's drink out of this. I was like, I'm not drinking out of that thing. And he said, you're just afraid you're going to lose. I was like, whew, I am not losing to a guy called Chad. Give me the fun. He drank 6 cans of Coors Light out of this thing. I drank 12. Defeated him and myself spectacularly. Unfortunately, did not leave me in the best communicative condition when the cops came knocking at the door. I know, and I'm just standing there holding this bright red O'Reilly's Auto Parts funnel. I'm wearing a wife beater because I'm mid-transition to being American. I'm not quite socks and sandals and truck nuts yet, but I was slipping that way at an alarming rate. And he's banging away on the door, and I was like, well, you don't open it. I grew up watching Cops, the reality TV show masterpiece of American television. He needs a warrant to come in. We all know that. And it turns out I wasn't right about that at all. This guy was banging on the door. He's like, Hampton Beach Police, open the door. And I'm standing behind it. Make things worse. It's a glass door. And I know, no, I'm not a total moron. There was a bit of a curtain there, but I think it only went to my knees or so. And so he knows I'm there, and I'm just there with this funnel. And every time he bangs, he's like, Hampton Beach Police, open the door. And I just pull back the curtain and go, hello. Turns out it only takes 2 of those to get him to kick open the door. Knock me on my arse. I'm just sat there on all these crushed cans of Coors Light with this O'Reilly's Auto Parts funnel wrapped around my neck like Jake the Snake Roberts. And there was a real mixed match of expectations going on, because I'll never forget the look in his face, because you never forget your first. But what was going on here? I don't know. Have you ever read a book called The Black Swan? Yeah, oh, you have. Fantastic. We just need to get you to move to Alabama and we can make America great again. You do. But you got to promote the reading, you know. But that one, it's a great book about statistics and probability, as you know. And the core argument of the writer, I think, don't trust me for interpretation of anything in any form with any mild amount of wisdom, but loosely, he's like, in any row of white swans, you're going to find a black swan. And if you expect the black swan to be there sooner or later, when you find it, it's not unexpected. So a stock market crash is a black swan event, but a lot of people expect it to be there. Therefore, it's not a shock when it actually happened. For this police officer, this was a black swan event, because he was expecting to see fear in my eyes, and I'd been waiting the whole summer to get arrested. I mean, I was ready to have a good time, you know. And I don't think he had any knowledge that Irish people grow up with no fear of the police whatsoever. We don't, and it's because when we grow up, our cops have no arms. And I don't mean that literally, I suppose, but now that I say it aloud, wouldn't be a bad solution in your country, to be honest. So yeah, give them all the guns they want, just take away their arms and send them out there to be a deterrent, you know. I know, it's not a good... Sadly, I think I could probably get elected somewhere with that campaign in America. If I picked the right place, you know, I'd be like, you know what? Guns don't kill people, arms do. And they're like, I'm with the Irish guy. Put that on a hat. I would support that right now. Like, what's going on there? It's not a good idea, to be honest. And it's not my fault. So because you have a lack of a good medical system in this country, sometimes I turn to medical marijuana for non-medical reasons. And I have ideas that make no logical sense whatsoever. And you give up time and money to listen to the absolute rubbish spraying out of my mouth. And that's the capitalism of being an American that I know and love. And I'm very thankful for it. I love it. This police officer, yeah, he was in a bit of shock, brought me down to the police station, and immediately he got out their participation certificate, so I was quite excited. And he was ready to be serious. I was not. He's like, sir, what colour are your eyes? And I'm like, sure, you're standing right there, you mad fecker. You can see them, you know. Not a good start to police custody. Yeah. He's like, sir, just answer the question. What colour are your eyes? And I was like, well, to be honest, it's not an easy question. Because my whole life, I've always thought my eyes were green. Now, my mother is convinced that they're blue. However, when I wear a green T-shirt, they get super green looking. But we have a photo of me, and they're brown in that photo. Nobody can explain it. So over to you, officer, I suppose. And, I know, I should have shut up, but I didn't. I doubled down. I was like, if you can't detect the colour of my eyes from 6 feet away, you're never making detective, are you? Realistically. I know, I should have shut up, but I thought I was on fire. I was like, if I keep doing it, I might get paid to do it professionally one day in America. You never know, you know. And he was gassed. He was still trying to be serious. I was not. He's like, sir, how much do you weigh? And I was like, oh, not an easy question either, to be honest. He's like, sir, just answer the question. I was like, no, easy, because my whole life I've been weighed in stones, and then I came to America and I got stoned for medical reasons, apparently. And now I'm weighed in pounds, and I have no idea how many pounds, because I'm after drinking 12 cans of Coors Light that I don't believe to be light at all. True, an O'Reilly's Auto Parts funnel for changing the oil in the car. I've been shopping at Costco, eating chips out of sleeping bags. I am a considerably chunkier monkey than I used to be. And he said, you're going to be here all night. But I was, and I had a great feckin' time, to be honest. We even took photos together. He took them, I was in them. But, you know, It was a real bonding moment. And oh, this man hated me so much that to get his revenge and publicly shame me for the incident, he made sure that my name was listed in the local newspaper. And he had no idea Irish people love getting in the newspaper. Oh, I went home, told my mother. She was delighted. She found this beautifully framed wedding photo of her and my dad hanging on the wall. Took out that photo, put in my arrest sheet, hung it on the wall, and wrote, "Live free or die." Oh, stop. I suppose that's the longest possible way of ever telling you that I am a moron. You can pick up on it from the story, I think. And it's one of those funny things. It took me years to figure out I wasn't the sharpest. We were in school and they'd go around the room reading, you know, and they make you do that all the time in school. Then they read aloud and they'd get to me and I couldn't really read the words. I didn't know why at the time. I knew there was an expectation to say words, so I just said whatever came into my head. And I had a particular affiliation for dirty words. And yeah, over time, if you combine those things, nobody asks you to read anymore. They'd be going around the room, they're like, Mairead, Maureen, Barry, not feckin' David. Tourette's, I think they're calling it. He'll have an incident. Don't even talk to him. Get away. Somebody brought me in a picture book of sharks and just went, there you go, listen, have that. Just look at some pictures of sharks. Go on, you'll love it. And I did. It came up with a pop-up poster and everything. I was delighted with myself. I knew an alarming amount of sharks for a lad from Ireland. And no reading expectations anymore. They just left me. They're like, Shark Boy, you stay over there. We'll keep going. No homework, no parent-teacher meetings, no expectations, no what are you doing with your life. It's clear. Sharks, picture books, that's you, over there. I know, man. I didn't read anything for like 7 years. It got to like 18 and they were having a chat. They're like, where's everyone going to university? And they just kind of skipped me. I was like, where am I going? They're like, no, yeah. I know, just because they said that now. I said, well, I'm going to have to find the place with the lowest entry requirements and get in there. And I did, and its academic prowess is reflected in its 3-letter abbreviation. It was called Tala Institute of Technology. Yeah. Good for you, yeah. Good at spelling. TIT. They called it TIT, and they had no concerns about that at all. They were shocked every Monday morning to find the sign for the university had been vandalized to the plural form. And turns out if you give a horny teenager a can of spray paint and 1 tit, they're going to want 2. So every Monday morning I walked into tits, which is a fantastic sentence to say, you know. And I wasn't joking about the sharks, by the way. I was a total junkie from this picture book. Like, I really got into them to the point where at 11 years old, when my front adult tooth grew in, I was quite excited. I'm like, woo, I'm an adult now. I slipped and fell and knocked out my new front one with my own knee within 48 hours. And my mother was like, were you fighting? And I was like, sadly, with myself. But I was quite excited because with the front tooth, I didn't know the whole root goes up nearly into your nose. And I was like, look at the size of that thing. It looks like a shark's tooth. My mother's like, what? And I was like, yeah, do you think I could make a chain out of it and just wear it around my neck and tell the kids at school it's from a great white shark? Yeah, she said, I don't see why not. That is just classic Irish parenting right there. They're always looking for entertainment. They're like, oh, this will be funny. No, go on, Shark Boy. They love that in school, yeah. Oh, you'll make loads of friends with your own feckin' tooth around your neck like a savage. No, go on. It'll be... Go. I don't know how long I wore that tooth around my neck for, but sadly, I think it was measured in years. I know, it wasn't until I was 18 that my parents were like, you know what, we should get that tooth fixed. And I'm like, well, yeah, I've been waiting for a while at this stage. And I didn't have much money, but so they had about £100, which does not buy you at the time a high-quality dental implant. It buys you something like a boxer's gum shield with a little tooth attached to it. And no, it just popped in there, and no one told me if you sneezed, it could just come out. Oh yeah, my first day walking into tits, I sneezed. This thing just went over some fella's head into a bush in front of the Students' Union. 200 people watching me looking for my own dental work in shrubbery. I was like, this cannot get any more embarrassing, but it feckin' could get more embarrassing. I got a girlfriend, you know, when you're 18, you have no idea what you're doing with the whole love-making thing. I'm on top, she's on the bottom. Gravity kicked in. Oh yeah, feckin' tooth fell out of my head, hit her square on the forehead, and because it was all gooey, it just stuck there. She had no idea this thing was there. She was just lying there, oblivious, like some kind of sexy unicorn. And I know, and I can't afford to lose this thing, so I'm trying to smack it off her. So I'm trying to knock off her horn, avoid and maintain my own horn. This was a very hormonally challenged situation to find yourself in as a teenage man. To this day, I don't think she knows she was involved in the incident, but seeing as we're taping this, her name's Jackie Murphy. If anyone knows her, let her know. And that seems a little bit of the feisty, sexualized nature. And you know, I don't mind sharing it with you, because when I was in school, this university, I figured out I'm the dumbest person here by a mile. Like, what's going on? And it turns out they were just reading, and I was not. That was it. So, and audiobooks were coming out. I'd figured out I was dyslexic by this stage. So I'm like, ooh, audiobooks, I'm getting going. And one of the first ones I read, I loved, by a guy called Steven Pinker, who's an MIT lecturer for like 21 years. And he has all these books about psychology, how the mind works, the stuff of thought, the language instinct. But his core point was, sometimes you need a bit of shock value to learn as an adult. If it's a little bit saucy and a little bit dirtier, your mind tends to remember it. And I was like, woo, well, I'm already doing that. So I like that. And then they told us we had to learn another language, so I stumbled across Richard Feynman, a Nobel Prize-winning physicist from America. And he has a great book called Surely You Must Be Joking, Mr. Feynman. And in that book, he says the best way to learn another language is horizontally. I said, tell me more, Mr. Feynman. I like where you're going with this. What do we do? And he said, you get another human, what he called a speaking dictionary, and you just keep shagging them until you know what they're saying. And I was like, whew, that is way better than Duolingo. I'm in. I was never so ready to learn in my life. Literally and physically. I was like, who do we start with and where do we start? And I was like, these books are great. I'd be missing out my whole life. I'd never read a book of fiction in my whole life. And luckily, Bill Clinton keeps a public list, Bill Clinton's favourite books of fiction. And I went, whoa, well, that man knows fiction, doesn't he? And yeah. And number one on his list is 100 Years of Solitude by Colombian writer Gabriel Garcia Marquez, Nobel Prize-winning writer. Fantastic book. And I thought, geez, it'd be great to read this in Spanish. And they were like, not a chance. That is the most complicated version of the Spanish language ever in a book. Stay away from that. Start with something simple. Read from context. Don't use the dictionary to look up every word. Just know it. Read a story you already know. So I picked something simple. It was The Alchemist by Paulo Coelho. Don't know if you know it. People with Crystals love that book. Yeah, there's a few back there. Because it's slightly hippie-ish, you know, it's like the universe will give you signs to tell you what to do and make the right decisions, follow the signs. But equally, the story's pretty simplistic. Dude with sheep goes for a walk with sheep, tries to turn sheep into gold. Nothing else really happens, to be honest. But it became clear to me. I'm like, well, follow the signs. I'm reading about Colombia. Richard Feynman said, shag your way to fluency. I know where I need to move. And that's what I did. I moved to Cartagena, Colombia, and I was the only Irish person living in Colombia at the time, which is pretty rare. And it was because, Irish people, you might remember, we were banned from Colombia for a while there because we had a group of lads who went over on a bird watching trip. And when they weren't staring at the birds, they were teaching people how to blow up cars for money, which, yeah, it's hard to pass that off as bird watching, to be honest. And you'd be like, why were they doing that? Corgis. Again, it's always somehow linked back to the corgis. But I was living in Cartagena, Colombia, and they turned the whole city into a movie set to film another Gabriel Garcia Marquez book, Love in the Time of Cholera. It was a movie adaptation of that. And there was an aspiring actress in the movie, and they wanted to hire a native English speaker to help her improve her English. And I was the only banana around. And I didn't have the heart to tell her that the Irish accent in English, not the easiest entry point to the English language. But she was too good looking to say no. So I hadn't a day's experience teaching English in my life. But by the end of the second class, she voluntarily took off all her clothes. Yeah, I was like, I am born to teach, clearly. Like, you don't need The Alchemist to follow the signs on that one. You know, you just, I was balls deep in a new career. And interestingly, her English didn't get any better, but my Spanish really started to take off. Do you know, it's because it's funny, but that sexual nature of words, the experiential nature of words, you live it, you tend to remember it a little bit more. And I don't know, I'm sure we have a few Latinos here. Do we? Make some noise. We have a couple of you. Oh, brilliant. Wherever there's Irish people, there's normally Latinos. We're emotionally connected when you think about it. Especially Mexicans. Like, you drink 5 beers, you stare at the Mexican flag for long enough, it's Ireland. Like, it's the connection is very clear. But we're in the same cycle of immigration, just at different stages, right? That's the way immigration seems to work, to my mind, in America. There's always a group that you're kind of trying to stop, and we find a way, and then that's the new group. And then we shag our way to leadership positions, and it moves on to the next one. Like, But the only thing that ever really changes is technology and the person in the situation. Like behind every Latino with a leaf blower is an Irish guy with a rake. And I'm not explaining that. You're on your own. You get it. It's a positive statement when you think about it, you know. But in most, where were you from, me Spanish speakers here?
Colombia.
Colombia. Oh, fantastic. Whereabouts?
Bogotá.
Bogotá. Chupando el frío con los rolos para tu desgracia. See, that joke's for two people. And if you didn't understand it, this town's just got too diverse for you all of a sudden. Like, I went to a comedy show. There was an Irish guy speaking Spanish with a Colombian. I didn't know whether to deport them, embrace them, shag my way to fluency. I was so conflicted. Oh, jeez, I love getting... So, right, perfect example. He's from Bogotá in Colombia. I used to live there. When I was done with Cartagena, I lived in Bogotá for 6 months. And in normal Spanish, the rest of the Spanish-speaking world, for I would like, they say, me gustaría o yo quiero. But in Bogotá, where he's from, they tend to say, regálame, gift me. Does not work anywhere else in the Spanish-speaking world. You go into a bar in Mexico and you're like, hola, bartender, gift me 9 beers, please. They're just like, get out. That is not how commerce works at all. But Colombians always say regálame, and I'll never forget it because I was doing the horizontal mambo with this girl because the classes were going really well. And she just started shouting at me, regálame la leche. There are way more Spanish speakers here all of a sudden. You Americans, you've been really embracing Latin culture. Good for you. Definitely know what it means, right? Don't feel bad. You haven't a clue, Chris, right? Yeah. Just check. But don't feel bad about that, because I had not a clue. I was like, literally translates as gift me the milk. It's like, this is a weird time to want to drink milk, but it could just be two dairy-loving cultures, you know? Like in Ireland, we grew up drinking milk with every meal, every moment of every day. We will drink a litre of milk, no problem at all. It wasn't that irregular. I hadn't a clue. It was back at that milk. It was that milk. Very sorry for imaginary ejaculating on you there. He didn't flinch, to be honest. There was no... You hadn't uncrossed his arms for the whole show, and I just thought, I'll give him a quick shot in the face, and you still... just took it. Very sorry about that. Do not put that in a Yelp review. Don't be laughing at him. I'll give you a shot as well in your bubble jacket over there. You are dressed for survival with your finest Patagonia. That deserves a shot as well, to be honest. Sorry, do not put this in a Yelp review. I went to a comedy club tonight. I think there was some illegal Colombians in there. There was a lot of Spanish, and then I witnessed an innocent man get ejaculated on, but in an imaginary manner. I don't know if I'll ever be the same again. 2 stars. Maybe it was okay. I don't know. Kind of enjoyed it. Chris, very sorry about that. I could have just gone anyway, to be honest. But you get the loose point. I didn't know it was that feckin' milk, so I'd been holding it in way too long and not giving it to her and basically pasteurising it myself. It was a very uncomfortable situation. And my own fault, I had no idea what the 80-20 principle was at this stage. And that's, I don't know if you've ever read that. It's a great book by a guy called Richard Koch, whose last name, strangely easy to remember. Not sure why. But he says 20% of the inputs always gives you 80% of the outputs. 20% of the effort gives you 80% of the results. And that law applies to most things universally. But in language study, it's really helpful for shortcutting the language learning process because you pick 20% of the words that are used 80% of the time. And conversely, Stephen Pinker, me MIT mate, who's a bit... Well, he's not me mate, we just have an imaginary relationship where he writes words, I read them and fantasize about having conversation with. That's the weird thing. Not in a sexual manner. Chris, do not take us there again. You horny hamster. Glad you're here. Glad you're here. I am very glad you're here for emotional stability and support. But Stephen Pinker, he says, conversely, that basically if you start learning another language over the age of 18 years old, you never get to full fluency. You kind of peak at about 80%. Now, if I'd have known that, I just would have gifted her the milk and gone back to Ireland, to be honest. Because I was a hard time doing the job they paid me to do because she was messing up prepositions the whole time. I mean, Colombian friend, I'm sure you know this, Latin speakers sometimes tend to mess up prepositions when they learn English as a second language. And as native English speakers, most of the time, we have no clue what prepositions are. I know, but when you say them wrong, we're very quick to go, you said that wrong there. And you're like, well, how do I say it right? And we're like, we don't know. They're those confusing little words like in something or on something. You know, like am I in the show or on the show? I can't even figure that out myself. And here I was trying to explain it to this girl. And it was gas because she'd come home with like all the dairy products and everything and the shopping and well, because we were living together. The classes were going very well at this stage. And she's like, I'm just going to put the food on the refrigerator. And I'm like, well, you might want to try putting it in the refrigerator. She's like, what's the difference? I was like, feckin' refrigeration. That's the difference. It's just not getting cold on the top of the fridge. Just not how fridges work. I was screwing it up because, of course, I'm a moron. I don't know anything about teaching. I totally blagged my way into this job. And I hadn't been using the combined wisdom of books, right? That's the beauty of a shelf, that you get to stack these books, read them, combine the knowledge, and find true lines that normally aren't there. If you go around just quoting one book, that's how we end up with Jehovah's Witnesses, you know. Don't be laughing too hard at that. They actually have 2 books, so... But you kind of get the idea. I wasn't stacking the books, and I'd never heard of this guy called Benny Lewis. And I actually met him one time randomly in Portland once upon a time. He's an Irish guy who speaks nearly 12 languages fluently. First Irish guy since our famous writer James Joyce to speak, give or take, 12 languages. And he wrote a book called Fluent in 3 months. And I was like, whoa, I like the sound of that. And it's probably the best book I've ever read on learning a language rapidly. Because he said, you can't just remember a word. The word must be made into a story. And a guy ran with this idea called Joshua 4, and he has an epic book called Moonwalking with Einstein. He had a bad memory, wanted to use the 80-20 principle concept to improve his memory in 1 year and see how good he got. By the end of that year, he was the US memory champion. That's genuinely a competition. Thankfully, not televised live. Could have probably gone on for a while. And all he was doing is taking a word, making it into a picture, picturing it taking place in a location like this one, and one last key step, making it dirty. Like, just unnecessarily filthy, inappropriate, mildly naked, sexy it up. They interviewed me. He said, the things I've done to my own mother to remember things. And I know, he went too far, but I do admire the commitment of the man. And it sounds mad until you start talking with some Spanish speakers. For example, me mate from Colombia, the word for to fit in Spanish is caber, right? Thank you. Don't trust Irish people teaching you Spanish. That would be some made-up stuff. But it is that. And if I just throw that word at you, you'll never remember it. But if you picture Donald Trump coming out of Trump Plaza, downtown Manhattan, and don't worry, you can picture his hands as big or as small as you want them to be, based on your own voting preferences. And he has a grizzly bear with him, but it's trying to run away from him because it doesn't want to get grabbed. And the grizzly bear is jumping into a taxi cab as a bit of a getaway vehicle. And it's a New York-style bubble-shaped yellow taxi cab. You know, the ones you'd see in the old movies in the 1990s. And this is a grizzly bear trying to get in a taxi. You can imagine the driver. He's like, "Bear, what you doing? You're not fit in taxi cab." I know, I went a bit Russian on that because feck 'em, they deserve a wee bit of abuse at the moment, at least, for invading other people's taxis. It was also for non-medical weed-related ideas I had. I spent an alarming amount of time during COVID trying to figure out how Russians could be known for being a bit homophobic while having so many people called Sergey. So I just thought, that's surreal. I can't be solving all these mysteries now. So picture the bear just scurrying towards the taxi cab, and he's a grizzly bear, so you can't tell him what to do. So he goes to jump in the back of the cab. He doesn't fit, gets his little hairy bear bottom stuck in the window. Little hairy bear legs are swinging in the wind because the bear doesn't fit in the cab. Caber is the word for to fit. Do that with 800 more words, you speak Spanish. I don't know. But once you start applying this to everything, you can go nuts with it. But I don't know, it's just that concept of shortcutting learning in any way, shape, or form. I was trying to learn Brazilian Portuguese. Any of you speak it by any chance? No, just...
Falo português pouco.
Oh, good work. I like you back there. Good work. Did you shag your way to it, or how did you come to the wisdom? That was
Brazilian.
Oh, you're half Brazilian. Oh, geez, good plan. Well, you'll know this one, though. And I was trying to learn Brazilian Portuguese because I love it, and it's very close to Spanish. So if you were trying to add another language, it would be a natural progression. You're like, right, how do I 80-20 principle this one? And I said to my friend, I think you're just taking English words and putting extra E's on the end of them and saying it right back to my face like it's a whole other language. He's like, we do not do that. And I said, oh, yeah, lend me your computer. I'll prove it to you. And he said, sure, use my lappy-toppy. I was like, do you call that lappy-toppy? And he said, yeah, sometimes I say nochi-bookie. And I was like, wow. I was just going to use the internet-y. He's like, yeah, we say that too. I know, it's wild. I was like, you must love Facebook-y. He said, I do. Yeah. I prefer tiki-talkie. And I was like, oh, this is fantastic. I was like, could you just watch a filmy on Netflixy? He said, yeah, with Bradgy-pitchy. And I went, Bradgy-pitchy. These are all words, by the way, aren't they? Yes, fantastic. I couldn't believe it. I was like, it turns out you can have a drinky in a clubby and listen to hippie hoppy, and that is a perfect sentence. I was so excited. I was like, on the way home from the clubby, do you ever get junk food? Maybe a Biggie Mackie? He said, yeah, sometimes I have a Biggie Mackie, but I prefer a hotchie doggy. I put lots of ketchup on my hotchie doggy. I was like, wow, that is a regular picky nicky. Did you ever wash it down with chocolachi? He said, yeah. I said, well, this language is excellent. He said, it's brilliant, but you have the right attitude. I said, I do, yeah. Thank you for the Fiji backy. I know. And then we got to a door, and the sign on the door said, pushy. And I went, well, I know this one. And he went, no, that means pull. And I went, you can feck off with this one. Very confusing stuff, and you might think this part of the show is a waste of time, but you just learned about 30 words in a language you didn't care about at all, and for that you got to have a bit of gratitude, you know. That's a word. But it's just lovely when you figure out little things like that to help you learn rapidly, especially when you're always taught you're a moron. I was like, there's no way I can speak any languages. And then a couple of roots. But I think that's the beauty of when you land in America. I don't know if this is just as an immigrant, but when you move to this country, you get the confidence from you guys. You guys have a level of confidence. It's just unmerited and fantastic. It's the kind of stuff where you're like, we're the world Super Bowl champions. We're like, we didn't even play. Like, how are you? How? Because Irish people, we don't really have confident, outspoken people. You know, we had one, Conor McGregor. I don't think we want another one, to be honest. Just draw a line under that incident right there. But so I was asking, I knew this lady, she was an editor of a major newspaper in America, so she knew books. And I was like, give me the best stories of just Americans just manifesting their way into wild stories and jobs. You know, give me a bit of confidence. She said, you got to read the Fred Cooney mystery, The Man Who Tried to Save the World, one of the greatest books ever that no one's ever heard of. And I think probably my own favorite personal book. But it was a 6'3" Texan guy who just declared himself the world expert in humanitarian aid relief. No experience whatsoever. Just went, I'm the greatest. And we were like, yeah, I guess he's good. He keeps saying he's good, so I think he might be the best. And he did. He kind of manifested his way to the point where there'd be a natural disaster in the world, and they all just call Fred. And they're like, yeah, everybody needs to report into Fred, and he's just going to fix this. And he got so good at his job that George Soros, the famous billionaire financier, wrote him a blank check and went, Fred, go fix Chechnya. And no one ever heard from Fred again. I know, I was like, I got to be careful with the confidence levels here somewhere, you know, but I love it, a very inspirational story. And I went, give me another one. And she said, read The Fish That Ate the Whale. One of the greatest stories you'll ever hear. He was a Jewish Russian immigrant who came to live in New Orleans called Sam Zamuri, nicknamed Sam the Banana Man, if you've never heard of him. He's taken so many bananas from the country of Honduras, import and export, that they tried to stop him. But he lived in America long enough to know he could use his newly found financial resources to hire his own private military force. Went down overnight, took over the country of Honduras, put in his friend as a puppet president. The most American thing you can ever do. Yeah. Even the CIA were like, we didn't know we could do that. That became Sam the Banana Man. His strategy became the playbook for CIA overthrows of Latin American countries to take primarily resources, primarily bananas. That's where you got the expression Banana Republic, which you've conveniently turned into a clothing store. I know. Chris, where are we going with this pile of waffle, or do you reckon? Oh yeah, I moved to Honduras. Well, it made logical sense at the time. I was reading about Honduras. They said, shag your way to fluency. They, of course, speak Spanish. They had sharks, and I was following the signs. So I was like, well... And I had a newfound confidence when I went down there from America. I just walked straight up to a whale shark oceanic research center and went, give me a job. And the guy's like, do you have any qualifications? I'm like, I'm the greatest person in the world, I think. He's like, what? And I was like, I'm not. But I used to wear my own toot around my neck for years. And I really like sharks, so I'd like a job, if you don't mind. I had a book when I was a kid, pop-up posters, everything. And he was just laughing at me. He's like, do you know anything about whale sharks? And I said, I do. I know they're the biggest fish in the world and that they have 2 cocks. And he's like, what? I know, not to be confused with Richard Koch from earlier who wrote the 80-20 principle. But they do have 2 penises, if you need some useless trivia in life. They're called claspers, and they're about my elbow to my wrist in length. And they just hang there, side by side, like every man's dream. Can you imagine? You're like, I drank too much whiskey last night, one wasn't working, but then I had another one just hanging around, ready to go. And it was massive, just hanging there on standby, you know? Every woman in here is like, that is double the bad decision making. And You would be scientifically accurate on that one. I don't know if you've ever read a book called Predictably Irrational by Dan Ariely. That book is great. His core argument is that humans are susceptible to irrational decision-making in certain predictable circumstances. None more so than when a man becomes aroused, he becomes a moron. And every woman in here is like, I don't need to read that book at all. I have lived that movie. I knew to be a point to this somewhere. I got the job. That was predictably irrationally, it turned out my new boss liked cocaine more than conservation. So he made some predictably irrational decisions himself. And I don't know what you know about whale sharks. They're big, huge shadows, and they just kind of cruise under the surface of the water. A bit hard to find, especially in the deep blue ocean. So they use spotter planes to find them. The plane radios the boat full of snorkelers. They get dropped off right next to them. Nothing can really go wrong. Whale sharks have teeth, but they're not designed for biting, so you're fine. But I mean, they do have two cocks, so they can get you if they want to get you. I don't know how. Do not Google that. It will ruin your browser history. So just trust me on this one. Now, unfortunately, my boss didn't have a plane because I think he spent all the plane money on cocaine. And so we used a different strategy called hope. And we all just got in the back of a boat and drove around the open ocean, hoping that we would find a shadow that we hoped to be a whale shark. And that was it. And because hope took so long, we sold alcohol to pass the time. And predictably irrationally, my second day of work, fucking boss didn't show up. I'm on my own with this group. My extensive 2 days of training is not cutting it. All I know is they're big and they have big cocks. This is not going to end well for anyone. And luckily, I had a group of Germans on the boat that day. Only 8 Germans, and they were being exactly as German as you think they might be. They were a bit friendly, but weighed down by guilt, slightly socially awkward, wearing Speedos, hair sticking out in all the wrong places. It was not the kind of visual you want or I want. I was pretty keen to find a shadow and get rid of them, to be honest. And I did. I saw a shadow. My extensive 2-day training kicked in, threw them in, and within a minute, this German had popped his head up the back of the boat, little snorkel on his head, panic look on him, and he went, "This is a tiger shark." I know, and that's why I don't do that job anymore. Now, nobody got eaten, but I love to think about it from the perspective of the tiger shark. Like, of all the things he taught, might happen to him that day, pretty low on the list was that a drunk German would descend from the sky in a pair of Speedos and teabag him in the face. That is a Black Swan event. Well, it's also way too far to go for a literary statistical book reference from 25 minutes ago that no one cared about to begin with. But it's kind of useful to remind you that Black Swan events sometimes can be slightly hard to define. And that combined with an expression we all know, anyone who loves books has heard the expression at some stage in life, don't judge a book by its cover. And I think the greatest example ever of those two things combined comes from Ireland. 41 years ago this year, we had 10 white ladies who worked in a grocery store, and they said, "We refuse to sell grapefruits imported from South Africa anymore in this grocery store. And by doing that, we're going to help end apartheid in South Africa. Who is with us?" And the whole of Ireland went, "We don't really like grapefruits." Like, if you stop selling bananas or apples or strawberries in the summer, we'd be with you. But they're kind of grapefruits, once in a while luxury purchase, to be honest. And I don't know if you've looked outside, but we don't have any black people either. So best of luck with your protest there. They weren't getting a lot of love, to be honest. And this one black guy showed up one day called Nimrod, and they were delighted. They're like, "Well, we've never seen a black person, and there's one out there right now, so I think we're having an impact. We are." They couldn't believe it. And your man Nimrod is like, "Ladies, what you're doing is so potentially impactful. I just wanted to stand here with you in solidarity until people pay attention." And he walked 3 miles each way every day and stood with them every day for 6 months, and people didn't really pay much attention, to be honest, until it made its way to an unlikely source. He was on his way to pick up his Nobel Peace Prize, Archbishop Desmond Tutu, and he said, "I have to meet these grapefruit ladies." And he did. He flew them to London to meet with him. And because of that, a rather interesting guy in America got wind of the story, and he's like, "I've never heard of a bunch of white people protesting something that affects them so little. This is bonkers. I have to march with these grapefruit ladies." That was Reverend Jesse Jackson, and he did march with the grapefruit ladies. On the way home, they stopped off in the United Nations to tell their story and became the first ever external speakers in the history of the United Nations to receive a standing ovation, just talking about what they were doing. That was enough to get the attention of a guy on Robben Island in South Africa on his long walk to freedom, who went, "Geez, once in a while you hear about people taking actions on your behalf that are so far disconnected from you, but it does connect you and inspire you. I have to meet these grapefruit ladies." That was Nelson Mandela, and he flew to Ireland in 1990 to meet the grapefruit ladies. But well, here's was the wonderful thing. By the time he flew there, the Irish government had given in, the trade unions gave in, the Catholic Church, the police, everyone who was kind of against him for the most part. And Ireland became the first Western country in the whole world to ban the import and sale of all goods from South Africa, thereby helping end apartheid with a fruit that we don't feckin' like. It's just a wonderful bit of history I love that all too often gets forgotten. But Nelson Mandela never forgot it. When he passed away, he made sure the ladies were invited guests of honour at his funeral should they wish to attend. And they did attend in a free South Africa that they helped create. And it was only around that time Nimrod, the one black guy who showed up, he got round to telling the ladies who he actually was. He'd been Nelson Mandela's cellmate on Robben Island. Oh, he knew exactly what he was doing. He knew Irish people love speaking up for other oppressed people. He knew we love hip-hop, that we thought we were a little bit black. And I tell you that story because the leader of those 10 white ladies was called Karen, so you never know. Your country needs a positive Karen story right now, more than ever. Oh yeah, Alabama. Because I was talking to my Irish mate in Alabama, and I was like, well, you must know who the most cancelled human in the history of the world is, right? Before Puff Daddy started investing in too much baby oil. Who was it? And he hadn't a clue, and I had to remind him, it's Sinead O'Connor, a 21-year-old Irish girl who said things that needed to be said and became the most cancelled human in the world. Very misunderstood at times, but we love her. Everything she did was amazing, but if you know her story, you'll know that she loved black music, hip-hop, reggae, very entrenched in the black music community and scene in London. And when she won a Grammy Award at 21 years old, she took that. Irish people, we don't really like being the centre of attention in any way, shape or form, but we're very happy to divert that to something else. So she took that as a moment to paint the Public Enemy rap band logo on the side of her head, the band we all loved in Ireland, because the Grammys were not recognising appropriately black musicians. And when the Grammys finally gave in, and they recognised the first ones in living colour, the first televised live recipients of that award, they came up wearing a Sinead O'Connor t-shirt, proof that we're not black, but we're a lighter shade of something, and we like to get involved when we can. But the reason I tell you that is because you never know the trajectory your life can take with a little bit of information or a good story. The Grapefruit Ladies never planned on being strikers. They were just told to go on strike. They didn't know anything about apartheid at all. They stayed on strike because Nimrod told them about Nelson Mandela, and then he told them about Rosa Parks. And he's like, if one lady could have that much of an impact on America and subsequently the world, imagine what you, as a group of ladies, could do. But he still needed a familiar symbol and analogy to explain apartheid. So he dropped a pint of Guinness on the table and went, ladies, this is apartheid in South Africa. Mostly black, held down by a little bit of white. I know. They went, we get it, we're in. Stereotypically, that's all it took to get the Irish involved. Alcohol, oppression, and a bit of singing. And we were all about it. That kind of ticks all our boxes. But it's just mad the direction your life can take sometimes in an unplanned manner. I never planned on trying to study Spanish or Portuguese or moving to America. Never planned on doing stand-up comedy. Not for a day in my life. I don't know if you notice, Irish people, we hate public speaking. We love speaking. We just hate doing it publicly. Total opposite of you Americans. You'll be in a meeting and you're like, nobody's talking yet, so I'm just going to kick it off by telling the group a little about myself and my own skill set, my accomplishments. I'm pretty good, so it could possibly take a while here, and then we'll go around the room, and if we have time left, everybody else can go. Does that sound good? And the Irish people are like, I am fecking out of here. I'm gone. That is the origin story of the Irish goodbye. We're like, we're not... I don't want to be here anymore. And then I was no different. My whole life I hated public speaking. And then a friend of mine tragically suffered a spinal cord injury. And he asked me to host a fundraiser. And, you know, how can you say no to someone in a wheelchair? But I did. I'm like, no, I'm not doing that at all. And he's like, what? You're always speaking. We can't shut you up. And I'm like, no, I don't do the public speaking. He's like, come on. I said, no, for me, it's a crippling fear. And he's like, I am in a wheelchair, you dildo. And I was like... Fair point. Sorry about that one. So I was reading books at the time by a guy I liked a lot called A.J. Jacobs. I don't know if you know him. He's a New York Times best-selling writer, and he does these one-year-long experiments in things that he doesn't understand to get a better understanding, and then he writes about them to see what he learned. So he's Jewish. He didn't understand the rules of the Bible, understandably enough. So he decided to follow them as literally as possible for one whole year. And at the end of the year, they found him in Central Park throwing stones at adulterers. So he's a little bit fruity, but in the best ways possible. And I loved it. So I was like, well, maybe I could try and get over a fear of public speaking by doing stand-up comedy for a year. It seems like the most difficult form of public speaking. A horrendous idea. So I didn't tell any Irish friends. And then I read Malcolm Gladwell's Outliers, and he said to be good at something, you got to do it for 10,000 hours. And I was like, oh, for feck's sake, that's way more time than I was expecting. And I don't know if you notice about Irish people, a little bit of a public service announcement as well. We do not care about your jobs. Like, if you're in a conversation with an Irish person about your career, you started that. We don't care at all. And my own mother, for way of an example, did not ask me what I do for 11 years. Yeah, she just said, David, are you keeping busy in America? And I went, yeah, that was it. And then we just talked about more interesting things. And I hadn't told her as I'd been doing stand-up comedy for 11 years. I didn't tell any of my Irish friends because it's clearly a bad idea. They do not support you with terrible ideas whatsoever. Kept it to myself, but when COVID happened, I had about 11 years worth of videos, I suppose, give or take a few, that I had never published. I had no social media, really. So I was like, I'll put these little funny stories about my family out into the world. It's not like my parents are going to see them. They have not got a clue what social media is. Turns out, my uncle, he knows social media. He found me telling a little story about my mum, sent her the video and went, I'll tell you what David's doing in America. He's fucking talking about you. Oh, I nearly laid an egg. I was so panicked. I panicked. I wrote to Instagram. I was like, Instagram, David here. I need to get this video down right now. I don't know how this stuff works. And they wrote back to me, in fairness, and they went, hello, David. How do we know you're you? And I was like, what? I've been David my whole life. You said, hello, David. I am David. This is David's account. Like, this is the easy part of the problem. We've already solved that one. And I was like, what are you talking about? They said, you need to be a verified you. I was like, I've been a verified me my whole life, you lunatics. But I can see what you're saying here. So just in case, here's a picture of my passport. And they went, that's not good enough. And I was like, what? That was good enough to get in your country? How can I just be a verified me? And they said, you need recent media talking about you, proving that you are you. And I was like, recent media? It's a pandemic. I've been just at home watching Game of Thrones, getting stoned, trying to figure out how many gay Russians are called Sergei. Nobody is writing an article about that anytime soon. So, luckily, I was reading a book called Catch-22 by Joseph Heller, one of the world's great books of fiction. If you haven't read it, for like 300 pages, just laugh out loud. And then for another few hundred pages, I have no clue what happened, to be honest. But I did like the start of it, but it inspired me. A Catch-22 situation, of course, is a bureaucratic, cyclical, stupid, frustrating situation that there's no easy and apparent escape from. So I had medical marijuana and time on my hands. So I sat down and wrote an article called Catch-22, One Man's Online Quest Just to Try and Be Himself. Got that published in a website I'd never really heard of before called irishtechnews.ie. Sent that link to Instagram, and those wankers verified my account. It's insanity. I never planned on trying to study Spanish. I never planned on working with sharks. Never planned on doing stand-up comedy. Never planned on reading any of these books. Never planned on coming here and imaginary ejaculating on a man called Chris in the front row. Like, these are not the kind of things you plan for. You just kind of got to follow the sign. That was not a sign. I don't know why I did that, to be honest. But you get the drift, really. Do you ever take a moment just to stop and go, how did I end up doing this? Like, did I read a book at some stage in life or something that inspired me to do all these things? I can trace all roads back to one. And for me, it was a book called A 4-Hour Workweek, and by a guy called Tim Ferriss. And a big best-selling book. And he's like, here's how to work less, make more money, and travel more. And I went, ooh, I'm in. How do we do this, Tim? And he said, we start a company. And I went, oh, no, I'm out. Too stupid for that. What other options have you got? And luckily, he had another one. He said, you get a job in a company that's so big, they don't have a clue what you're doing, lose track of you, you get paid to do nothing. And I went, ooh, that is for me. I like that. And I did. I got a job with the world's largest private education company. I ended up based in Dubai. We had 2 offices in Dubai. I told each office I worked from the other one. I didn't work from any office at all. I even outsourced my job to a dude in India, and I just went to the beach every day. Yeah, I was very tanned looking for an office worker in those days. And they finally figured it out. They asked me to come in and meet my team after like 6 months, and I didn't know I had a team. So it was a bit of a shock to the system. And they're like, you better do some team building to make up for lost time. And I'd never read a book on team building, so I brought them bungee jumping, which I now know, not a great idea, to be honest. Like, that is a real red flag for HR and legal departments everywhere. But they gave me a corporate credit card and told me I was the boss, so I figured, dictatorship, I'll do whatever I like. And not a good idea. Brought them bungee jumping. They didn't want to go. So to incentivize them, I said, well, listen, I'll do it in my shirt and tie. We know I haven't been wearing that because I've been at the beach. And I'll sit down like I'm typing on a little chair. I'll tie myself to the chair and you get to kick me off it backwards, tied to this bungee thing off a crane. Oh, they all wanted to go now. I miscalculated a bit. Normally when you bungee jump, it's fairly straightforward. Your legs go together and they're tied together and you bounce up and down repeatedly. But if you do it tied to a chair, you really change the dynamics of it because you got to put a harness around your kind of testy satchel private parts area. And boy, did I badly miscalculate the gravitational impact of being repeatedly and voluntarily teabagged from a crane. Oh, turns out bad for team building and family planning. And someone took a photo of that and put it in the front page of the newspaper in the Middle East, and that's why I'm here doing comedy now. You never know how things work out. I ended up moving to San Francisco. I was in California. I was reading a book called The Devil's Teeth. It's about some of the biggest great white sharks anywhere in the world that live off the coast of San Francisco. And a friend of mine saw me reading it, and he's like, "Do you like sharks?" And I was like, "Whoo, understatement of the year." Yeah. I didn't tell him about the two. I figured that was TMI. But he said, "Well, you won't believe this. My friend works for the Great White Shark Research Association here. I have access to a website I'm not meant to have access to. It shows me for all the tagged great white sharks that are active in the area are. There's tons of them here right now. My researcher friends never work on the weekend. Conditions look glassy, flat, perfect. I just happened to buy a boat 3 weeks ago. I was thinking we could make a decoy seal out of a bit of carpet, bring it out there, drag it behind the boat, and see could we get a great white shark to jump up and eat it. Do you want to go?" Oh, I nearly gifted myself the milk. Like that was, I would have just spontaneously combusted. That was the best thing that ever been asked of me whole life. I was never so excited, but now I had to make a decoy seal out of carpet. I have no experience doing that whatsoever. I just moved back from Colombia, so I was very inspired by the female form. You know, they're very noventa, sesenta, noventa. They say la guitarra. I Shakira the heck out of this seal. Just very curvaceous on the bottom. But then I had to stop and ask myself, well, who am I to assume the gender the great white sharks prefer to eat? You know, so I made it a bit masculine on top, feminine on the bottom, and we called it Sammy, which we were confident was the world's first trans carpet seal. And I know, it was we brought Sammy out there to their impending doom, and we were only there a minute, and this 18-foot great white shark swam directly under our 16-foot inflatable boat. Oh yeah, never mentioned inflatable to me. But clearly I saw it when I finally turned up to go on the trip. But at that stage, I'd been visualizing carpet seals getting munched. I was making curvaceous, trans, Shakira-orientated seals. I was not capable of making a rational decision anymore. My friend, fair play to him, he was like, "Dude, this is the worst plan I ever had." And I was like, "No, it's the greatest. Get in, Sammy. This is your time to shine." Before he changes his mind. And I whipped out my phone, start narrating it like a moron. I was like, this is how dumb people end up on the National Geographic. And if you had told 11-year-old me that I would be fishing unsupervised for great white sharks in America, instead of watching this through my own eyes, I was recording it through a technology device for future appreciation of potential strangers, I would have punched myself in the face and knocked out my remaining two. And it was Californians were kind of weighing on me. You know, when you live there, you'll hear them. They'll be like, "Are you living in the moment right now? Are you truly present with the environment around you? Are you at one with the experience you're having?" And you're like, "Will you leave me alone?" But over time, they do weigh on your negativity with a bit of unnecessary positivity. And I was like, I'm just putting the phone away. If anything happens, I'll see it with my own eyes. To be honest, Sammy wasn't looking good at the start. Just kind of floundering around. But as soon as we stepped on the gas, looked exactly like a seal, skipping across the top of the water. This great white shark shot out of the water. I mean, like full air jaws breach with Sammy the seal in their mouth and munched them, irrespective of gender or material of construction. And I don't have that on video because I'm a feckin' moron living in the moment. And I know that sounds ridiculous, right? Because when Irish people, storytelling is such a core part of our existence, and our stories are so nuts that I've realized living in America, you guys don't believe anything. You guys are just sitting there like, nice story, but I just don't believe any of this happened whatsoever. Just complete fiction. I just can't have confidence in it right now. And an Irish person's like, oh yeah, same thing happened to me, to be honest. So I started bringing a little bit of evidence, but I just wanted to show you one or two elements that you're like, Jesus, did that actually happen? So this one, I think you'll get an idea of what's going on. Oh yeah, that is me sucking Coors Light out of an O'Reilly's Auto Parts funnel, surrounded by a new diverse group of friends, wearing a wife beater, so mid-transition to being American here at the moment. Got a Budweiser booby poster in the background. The most American-looking dude you're ever gonna see. And I just want to show you that because if there's some truth to that, there might be a bit of truth to this one as well when you think about it. So we'll just zoom in here a little bit. I know, and my personal favourite part of this by a mile is just how frequently the word Ireland appears. And this was my roommate, Anthony. He got arrested every single week for the whole summer. Currently employed in Ireland as a police officer. I know, it's Mel. Now, I know I mentioned tons of book. I did promise you a website. Any book I mention, any book I like in any capacity, I have linked to on that website, which is on my general website, so you don't need to write it down or anything. But it links to all the Amazon reviews, just so you can check them out if people think they're good. But it links to Libby primarily, which is the best link. If you don't know it, greatest thing I ever found in America. Look at you. Clapping, I like your style. Clapping for a free library book service app. We just need to round you people up and ship you to Alabama, and we can truly make America great again. That's the attitude we're looking for here. But it is, if you don't know it, especially if you're dyslexic and you can't really read books as easy, audiobooks, free audiobooks for life with Libby. It's fantastic. It's so ironic that you don't have free healthcare, but you can freely read about why you should have, which is fantastically ironic. So I got carried away, read loads of books. I called this one Shelf Help, which was a bit of a mistake because I thought it was a good idea, the power of a shelf and a parody on self-help. But it turns out a lot of people are like me, dyslexic. They read that word as self-help and they're like, I am not going to a self-help comedy show. And I wouldn't blame you. I wouldn't go to one either. I've always hated false advertising and self-help with a passion because when my parents were kids, when I was a kid, my parents got catfished into thinking a company from Grand Rapids, Michigan, Amway, was a good business opportunity. Do you hear the groans of the Amway people? I know, it's a big pyramid scheme if you didn't know it. They just sold each other substandard products for future financial gains that never really transpired. And to keep the whole pile of BS on track, they use motivational books in large quantities to keep each other motivated to make no money at all in the future. Called like Chicken Soup for the Soul or How to Win Friends and Scare Off Your Neighbours. Anyway, my house was full of self-help books, so I hated them in Ireland growing up. But then at some stage, ironically, you realise as you get older, you need some help with yourself. And you're like, oh, damn it, maybe I need self-help after all in this category. But it is the best source of wisdom when you think about it. In the modern day environment where we have people arguing over like a couple of words in a comments section, books are the only really source we have where someone had an idea and thought about it for years and then paid an editor to remove every unnecessary word and then a fact checker to make sure it actually happened. It's the complete opposite of a presidential statement, press release, debate, realistically. Not in your country, of course. But so that's where I turn to the books, I suppose. I think we need them now more than ever. So I mentioned loads. You might remember Factfulness. That was starting get to know the numbers behind things for the true story. It's how we found out Irish people are out eating the whole world. But Americans, don't worry, you're still actually the chunkiest monkeys in the whole world. We're just better at walking it off. I know, statistically accurate. That was the Fred Cooney mystery. You might remember that was the guy who manifested himself into one of the coolest jobs ever. Predictably irrational. It was Dan Ariely that men cannot make good decisions with one penis or two. Have any of you ever read his book? It gets a little bit saucy towards the end. Do you remember he did a survey with UC Berkeley graduate students, and it was very sexual. He said, would you roofie a woman to sleep with her? And they went, no. What the hell is wrong with you? Would you have sex with an animal? They're like, an animal? What is wrong with this survey? Would you sleep with a minor? And they're like, oh my God, this is disgusting. And then he made them retake the survey after masturbating, but not ejaculating. And now, they were raping and roofing. I know, it's a bit shocking. Just read the book. Good read. But that is the point. Steven Pinker said you got to make it a little bit shocking to get your message across. He was trying to prove why men don't use condoms in a high enough rate as they should do. And it turns out they wait to make the decision to use the condom until they're in an irrational moment. So they basically get an erection and go, what should I do here? And they see a woman, they're like, well, I saw her washing her hands, so I think we're good to go here. And in they go. And that kind of explains some bigger concepts. I know, slightly shocking, but that was Steven Pinker's point, backed up by Mr. Feynman, our Nobel Prize-winning physicist, who said, shag your way to fluency. And he actually got paid to speak at a conference in Brazil, went down 3 weeks early, just banged it out, and then went to that presentation, gave it in Brazilian Portuguese, a language he did not speak 3 weeks earlier. Legend. That's what he should have won the Nobel Prize for, I think, to be honest. Speaking of Nobel Prizes, we had 100 Years of Solitude by Gabriel Garcia Marquez. It was that and Following the Signs in The Alchemist that led me to Love in the Time of Cholera and trying to teach prepositions to an aspiring actress in Cartagena, Colombia. And I was screwing it up because I wasn't combining the knowledge of books and I wasn't making it saucy enough. So finally, I said to her, I think I have this. Imagine you wanted me to gift the milk on you, but instead you said gift the milk in you. Whew, the difference is a lifetime. Oh, she never screwed up prepositions again, so there might be something to it being a bit saucy. I ended up in Colombia, then of course from Colombia I ended up in Honduras. I was reading the book The Fish That Ate the Whale. That's what it kind of seeded the idea to go there. If you don't think that happened about the Banana Republic, read Confessions of an Economic Hitman, one of my favourite ones on that topic. Moonwalking with Einstein by Joshua Foer. You already learned his techniques tonight to figure out the word for to fit in Spanish, which is of course caber. It's wild how easy that is to remember. It takes a second or two, but basically that's the technique. Visualize it, mix it with Fluent in 3 Months by Benny Lewis, do dirty Spanish or whatever language you're taking at the time, mix it with the 80-20 principle, make it unnecessarily kinky, and you can get out there and just come with anyone you like. Sorry about that, Chris, earlier on, but this one, The Sharks, you might remember The Devil's Teeth. That's a book about the biggest great white sharks anywhere in the world, for the most part, in the highest number. The End of Poverty is how Irish people went from no foods to all the foods. Black Swan is how to get teabagged by a German from the sky. Irish people and Latin people are emotionally connected. There's a lot to that behind every Latino with a leaf blower is an Irish guy with a rake. We really are, and that is the book about it, Los Paisanos, the forgotten Irish who changed the face of Latin America. We're the only European country in history to fight on behalf of Mexico. Then we went to Colombia and Venezuela and fought alongside Simón Bolívar to try and liberate those places. We went down to Uruguay, where we started a lot of their first medical schools and systems, went to Argentina, set up the Navy, and then we shagged our way to president of Chile in a guy called Ambrose O'Higgins, who became the supreme leader of all of Latin America for 6 years, proving long before me, Irish people have been balls deep in Latin culture. And I think we will continue to do so. We get on pretty well together. Catch-22, remember that one? That's how I got those wankers at Instagram to verify my account. Nelson Mandela, on his long walk to freedom, came across the grapefruit ladies, and the first lady to refuse to sell those grapefruits was called Mary Manning, and that's her book Striking Back. And a slight bit of an injustice I did them, because there was actually one man, Nimrod, who joined 9 ladies and 1 man. It wasn't 10 grapefruit ladies, it was 9 ladies and 1 man, but I left out the man because history is easier without the minority group sometimes. So, oh, good for you, you're getting sarcasm, you never know. You get the idea. Speaking of sarcasm, say nothing. How Irish people think they're slightly black and were inspired by your civil rights movement in America. Obviously, when I was growing up in Ireland, we didn't have as large of a black community as we do now, so we didn't know much about being black. So I read a Ta-Nehisi Coates book. He certainly knows about it. And interestingly, he talks about whitewashing history and leaving out minority groups. And for that, some of your intellectual hotspots in America are trying to ban his book because they don't lack information. So just have a read of it before they get it, or stop them making it disappear. Fantastic book. The Body I love a lot by Bill Bryson. That's where I got a lot of the facts about like chunky monkeys, and statistically, like, it's just full of fantastic trivia. Did you know by living in America that you become 5 times more likely to die of choking on food than anywhere else in the world? Yeah. As a nation, we're just putting too much in the hole. Like, you think you could figure that out? Just be like, listen, this doesn't fit in your head, Carl. Don't be putting it in there. Don't get angry at me. I'm just out here trying to help save lives, to be honest with that. And now, Bill Bryson, he was living in New Hampshire while I was getting arrested for drinking out of a funnel. So we were both working on very different projects. But they're at the same time. All this madness for me goes back to the 4-hour work week. That's really the one that sent me down the rabbit hole. That led me to the 80-20 principle, to shortcutting language learning, to Benny Lewis. Led me to A.J. Jacobs, the guy who went and stoned adulterers at the end of his year. That inspired me to do a year of comedy, which, because of Outliers, led to 11 years of comedy, which is now 13 years. And that's how I ended up in Madison, Wisconsin, doing a show about books. That is not a good idea. Don't be clapping. If you're going to save your applause, save it for someone who deserves it. That is Sammy the Curvaceous Seal. Very curvaceous there. And I'm telling you, now, this sounded too mad to be true, so I brought you a little video.
We launched them. Swim, Sammy. That is the worst swimming carpet seal I've ever seen. Worst plan ever. It's like people that never end up in the National Geographic the right way.
I know. Nobody is more disappointed than that crap video ends right there. It's kind of like I promised you a porno and we all just got to see the pizza delivery guy arriving. Worked out kind of good for me because retrospectively I learned that there's a significant fine in California for baiting and attracting a great white shark. Yeah, so if all you could just shut up about this one, that would be appreciated to help my immigrant journey. And because we're recording this, I do have to say that I did not have any relations with that seal. But you know, total fiction, Bill Clinton style. But that was clearly a bad idea. This one I thought was a kind of decent idea. At least that's Catch-22, one man's online quest just to try and be himself. Published in Irish Tech News, and I had so much extra time on my hands, I even stuck my own head onto the movie poster. And in a wonderful turn of events, the word for that in Brazilian Portuguese is photoshoppy. Just if you need some more vocabulary in a language you didn't care about earlier on. This one, not a bad idea. I thought this one, horrendous idea. And you can see that by the look on my face. That's my tie leaving my body with gravity. My face says instant regret. They are people down below this crane. That is a chair that I am tied to. And this foot represents a hockey stick of negativity heading towards my man parts that nobody ever wants to see that much stuff heading in that direction. And I could tell you how painful that was, or I could just show it to you. Do not be applauding that stupidity. I just want to prove it to you. I'm a moron. These are not the actions of a rational human, you know? That has long-affecting consequences for, I know, an emotional trauma, but I just wanted to prove, I suppose, any moron can seem slightly more informed if they read a bit more, because I'm clearly a bit of a nutjob on some level, but equally, I just want to show you the Irish people, our stories are so nuts that we actually do be a bit nervous sometimes telling you them, because we just give you the Cliff Notes version, because we're like, they're never going to believe half the stuff we're saying. We were actually drinking so much in New Hampshire. Remember I was saying we were living in Hampton Beach, New Hampshire, drinking out of the funnel, that my friend actually broke his leg in 3 places drinking that night, and we have no clue what happened to him. We had to get the photos developed a week later on a camera, like the Hangover movie style, and it turns out this is him getting taken away by the paramedics. I know, and he has 3 broken bones in his leg here now, and you'd think he'd be in pain, but if you focus on his cheekbones, you can see he is smiling like a Cheshire cat. This guy's even smiling back at him. He's smiling so much, and I was like, geez, you must have had a great time in hospital. Look how happy you looked, and he's like, sure, you should remember, you were there with me, and I was like, ooh, did not know that. I was like, I hope I took good care of you, and he's like, you didn't even stop me drinking out of my own shoe. I was like, oh man, I must have been messed up. What was I doing? He's like, oh, I'll show you. This is what you were doing. That is me, sadly, funneling oxygen out of a CO2 machine in a wife beater. A real low point of my American journey. Now, and I know, just drunken madness from a few misspent years of my youth. You can forget it any time you want, but I would never want you to forget these words. Young workers who refused to handle the fruits of apartheid in Dublin provided inspiration to millions of South Africans, the ordinary people far away from the crucible of apartheid, cared for our freedom. Nelson Mandela in 2008. Well, who'd have anticipated that Nelson Mandela, Archbishop Desmond Tutu, and Reverend Jesse Jackson would get to meet a great white Karen? Like, what are the chances? Like, if you told South Africans that a white Irish lady with a mullet would help down, they'd never have believed you. Proof that Karen's lives matter too, to be honest. Come. But you might look at that and you think, well, that's a black swan event. But if you know Irish culture, you'll know it's a white swan event. Irish people are always speaking up on who they perceive to be other oppressed nations. That's why you'll always hear us talking about Ukraine and Palestine and Gaza, because you say, if you see something, say something. And we're like, well, we've seen something before, and we said something before, and we're seeing that again. And you'd be like, well, why are they speaking up about this? Corgis. That's why. When you think about it. You might not agree with Irish people's perspective on it or other people's, but that's the beauty of books. You get to read them and go down your rabbit hole of knowledge, and they allow us to have difficult conversations. Fools are always full of confidence. Readers are full of always doubt and questions. It allows us to walk through these. And the thing I love about books is you never know what happens when you read too many. I read so many, I was like, I might write one. And my Irish friends are like, you can't even spell, you mad bugger. Do you not remember you sat in the corner with your little shark book all the time? Lunatic. Do you not remember you did a spelling test and instead of writing David, you spelled your name Davdi, and the teacher was looking for an Indian kid for about 7 years? Like, who? I got 8 Davids, one of them is an Indian boy. We do not have any Indians in this country whatsoever. Who is Davdi? Cannot wait to read that bestseller. Then I told my American friends, and they're like, oh my God, I'd love to see that journey for you. Yeah, oh, I believe in you. I think you can do it. I know you struggle with words, but maybe you write one every day, like a miniature morning pages exercise, and in time you just nourish it. It'll grow, like a plant. Just water it, and in a whole time you'll have a sentence on your hand, maybe even a chapter. I believe in you. If you're struggling for focus, take some of my Adderall. I have a whole cabinet here behind me, and I had the false American confidence rubbed off me. I was like, I'm fucking doing it. I'm going to narrate a book, and that's what I did. I didn't know you could do that, and I didn't know the key to a good book is an editor. Find a good editor. How do you do that? You go to the back of any book you ever read that you liked, and you go to the acknowledgement section, and you find out in the first or second paragraph, because it always is, who they thanked, if they're a good editor, and then you offer that person money to turn your questionable words into good words. And that's what I did. I ended up selling the book to a publisher, ended up in Barnes & Noble and Borders, and I'd be walking through the airport, I'm like, there's my book. I can't even feckin' spell. Fantastic. And then in a horrible, unanticipated sequence of negative events, Amazon had to put my book in a category, and they put it in the feckin' self-help category. I was never so sad. I was like, they are never going to let me back into Ireland. They'll be like, go on, feck off back to America. Tony Robbins, with your motivational content. And I don't know if you know this about Irish people, we really undersell stuff. We don't like saying anything's good that we might be involved with. You're like, is that a good book? And I'm like, no, it's crap. Americans are always like, will you be selling it out after the show tonight? I'm like, no, do something better with your money. You already wasted enough coming to this show tonight. The publisher's like, hey, you cannot have that attitude. We've invested in you. Get out there and shout from the rooftops about how good you are. And I'm like, oh, no. If you write it, they will come. That's the way I'm approaching this one. And they're like, no, well, if you're not going to say nice things about yourself, ask other people to say nice things about you. And I'm like, oh, that sounds even worse. Are you nuts? But they kind of strong-armed me into it. So I said, well, I know this fella. He stoned adulterers once in Central Park. I think he'll do anything. And there he is on the cover, Mr. A.J. Jacobs. What a legend. And I said, well, I might keep trying this. So I did some more. I went American. Then it felt a bit weird, so I went back to being Irish. This book is great. I haven't read it yet, but David drew a picture when he was 6 years old of a penguin drinking beer in a Chinese restaurant, and it was clear the potential for slight wisdom and misguided creativity were there. Marita Nihill, David's mother. At the end of the day, that's the only endorsement I ever cared about. So it is the best one. But the point is, you never know what will happen when you go down these rabbit holes. And I never had a signed copy of a book in my life until I moved to America, which is wild, because Ireland is famous for literature and writers. We have more Nobel Prizes than China, despite being slightly statistically outnumbered. And most of them are for peace, or writing peace, or making about peace, or something to do with peace. So we're normally pretty good on the old peace. But I never had a signed copy of a book until this one. First one I ever got. Steven Pinker, the guy I like reading a lot. For Dahi, David in Irish. Continue globalizing Irish swear words, Steven Pinker. Little did he know how feckin' seriously I would take that one. And here's the beauty of America. Yeah, you might be 5 times more likely to die choking and a bunch of other strange stuff, but it's also probably the greatest place in the world just to manifest random things and dreams and aspirations you have. It is a truly anything's possible place. I was like, I wrote a book. I might be a writer now. My American friend's like, oh, you are? Yeah, you are 100% a writer. Get out there, shout it from the rooftop. So I went on LinkedIn, called myself a writer. 46 complete strangers endorsed me for skills I do not possess. I got paid to speak at a writers' festival alongside Steven feckin' Pinker. It's a good reminder that you can read your way from TIT to MIT if you really need it, but you never know what will happen. Then I got an email, and it was from Stanford Graduate Business School. And they said, David, we heard you did 10,000 hours of stand-up comedy to try and get over fear of public speaking. Would you like to come and teach our students at Stanford? And I was like, I went to tits. Like, what? What are you asking me here? I was like, this is definitely my friends in Ireland catfishing me. Like, I'll do it, but you have to pay me into my Nigerian bank account. I was like, go on, tell me, what's the name of this course do you want me to teach on? They said it's called Humor, Serious Business. I was like, there's no way that's real. Like, Americans are not paying $100,000 a year to study that, and it turns out they are. Humor, Serious Business, faculty, Seth Meyers alongside some complete banana down in the corner here. Paid me in alcohol, very stereotypically. I got to do it for 3 years, and then it led to one corner crappiest photo ever, but that's me on stage at the University of Oxford, the home of all the corgis. I know, I couldn't believe it. They reached out to me and they're like, will you come and teach here? And I had to. And I was like, do not trust Irish people in this situation. It was just too much potential to go wrong. And I was standing on stage and they're all staring at me, very stuffy. And I was like, wow, the irony of this one. The most British institution on the planet, have had to pay an Irish person to come here and help you with a language you forced upon my people. I never got invited back, but I don't care at all. But that's the point of this whole thing. If you have information or symbols or heroes that are based in great stories, you don't need much sometimes to inspire your own little bit of a protest. It can just be a shark book or a bunch of posters, 11 white people who think they're black in a band called The Commitments, or Sinead O'Connor painting the Public Enemy logo on the side of her head to stand up bigger than things that she was for. The way I think about books is like a kid's bedroom, and I think it's a kid's bedroom that we never grow old to go into, because at the end of the day, we all need a little bit of shelf help. And if you're ever on the fence about a social or a global issue, just ask yourself, what are the Irish people doing? And do that. It'll probably work out. Thank you very much. Have a great night. Greatly appreciate your rest of the week. Thank you very much, Madison. You've been amazing. Thank you.
Another turning point, a fork stuck in the road. Time grabs you by the wrist, directs you where to go. So make the best of this test and don't ask why. It's not a question but a lesson learned in time. It's something unpredictable, but in the end is right. I hope you had the time of your life. So take the photographs and still frames in your mind, hanging on a shelf in good health and good time. Tattoos and memories and dead skin on trial. For what it's worth, it was worth all the while. It's something unpredictable, but in the end is right. I hope you had the time of your life.